Okay, this is problem 7.1.42. They ask us to graph and they give us g of x is equal to the absolute value of x plus 3. That's what these big lines are right there. That's telling us that we're dealing with an absolute value. Okay, so anytime you're graphing these, you can always use an xy chart to find the points that you're going to graph. And since this is in function notation, remember that g of x is the same thing as y. It's just function notation, replacing y. And so instead of doing an xy chart here, I'm actually doing an xg of x chart. So I'm going to go ahead and pick some values for x, and I'm going to plug them in and evaluate and find what the y would be. So I'm going to start with a value of -3, and I'm going to pick some values around that. Now, how I know that I'm doing that is because -3 right here actually gives me a 0. And then I know that, I'm going to be looking at values that are bigger than 0 and less than 0. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and evaluate here. So let's start with the -5. So g of -5 is equal to substituting that -5 in. For the x, we have the absolute value of -5 plus 3. So that is the absolute value of -2. And the absolute value of -2 is a +2. Remember that the absolute value function just makes a number positive. So when I take the absolute value of a -2, that becomes a +2. The absolute value is the distance from 0 on the number line. That's how it's defined. And therefore, that's always positive. Distance is always a positive value. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and place that there in my chart. Let's go ahead and evaluate g of -4. It's the absolute value of -4 plus 3. And when we take -4 plus 3, we get a -1. The absolute value of a -1 is a +1. And we'll just keep doing this here. G of -3. That's the absolute value of a -3 plus 3, and that's the absolute value of 0, which is just 0. Okay. G of -2, absolute value of -2 plus 3, and -2 plus 3 is +1. The absolute value of a positive number is still just a positive number, so g of -2 is 1. And g of -1, we have absolute value of -1 plus 3. These are absolute values, and so that is the absolute value of a +2, which is just 2. Okay, so we have an XY chart here, and we're going to go ahead and just graph these ordered pair points now. We should expect to see a V shape come out of this because absolute value graphs are always V-shaped. And so when we go and plot these points, this is the general shape that we're expecting to see. Okay, and I'm just going to do this using hash marks. It gets us close enough to a graph, at least, that you can see with this webcam. Okay, so the first point that I'm going to plot here, -5, 2. So -5 for the x puts me right here, and +2 is right there. The next point, -4, 1. So over -4 for x, up 1 for the y. Then we have the point -3, 0. And that's right here. And then we have the point -2, 1. And the point -1, 2. And we do indeed see a V shape come out of this. And so that is our graph for this problem.